This is your librarian, Mickey Harrington, and we're going to be going over thesis writing. I'm going to show you some excerpts from MFA Theses, and while we're going to be focusing on the thesis statement, feel free to pause the video if you want to read the entire text that's on the screen. And if you'd like to come back to these slides to go through at your own pace later, just go to the research guide at research.lesley.edu/MFA. You'll find the slides under Research and Writing Help. So let's get started. You're going to be joining the scholarly conversation. If you scroll to the bottom of this page, you'll find instructions for how to publish your final thesis in the institutional repository. If you publish your thesis with us, it will be available globally. So you'll be joining a global scholarly conversation. Because in your thesis, you're using existing scholarship to form new ideas about art. You're publishing your ideas, adding your voice and expertise to the conversation, and then some other scholar might use your thesis to form new ideas about art. And this can continue throughout your entire professional life as you continue to join the scholarly conversation. To help focus your thesis and think about what it is you actually end up putting on paper, you can ask, am I adding a voice and ideas to art scholarship that didn't already exist? And 10 years from now, when an undergraduate art major stumbles upon your thesis, what will they learn about your work? And if you have trouble thinking of a thesis statement, it can help to think of a question that your artwork is answering. These research questions help you narrow the context you provide to only what's relevant to your work. So that instead of writing what ends up looking like an art history report, you're staying very focused and you're only providing citations and research that are specific to you and your work and providing context to that work. A lot of people think that you have to choose the proper scholarly language for your ideas while you're developing the ideas, but sometimes it's okay to develop the ideas first and just put them down on paper, even though the language isn't massaged very much. It's just very raw, because you're going to be able over the next year to massage the language and get it to sound more and more scholarly. So it's okay to just get something out on paper, just in the effort of developing your ideas. So in that vein, we're going to go through some examples. So this is a start with something that's very raw. You know, it might be a very basic way that you explain your artwork to your grandparents, for example. Sometimes people create man-made structures to mimic things found in nature, and I take pictures of it. And then you might end up massaging it a little bit, ending up with a better statement over time. Like, there's a difference between natural and man-made structures in Hawaii, and I explore that tension in my work. So now we have language that's a little bit more evocative, like exploring tension, and we also are more specific. We're talking specifically about Hawaii. And a way to turn that into a research question might be, have the artificial parts of Hawaii become a more authentic representation of the state? Is there even a point in differentiating between the artificial and the organic? So if you start off with a research question like that, it's a little bit easier to see how your thesis statement is just the answer to that question. So my thesis project questions whether these are illusions or the reality of Hawaii, and whether the distinction between organic and manufactured nature is relevant. This is a way to focus the rest of your paper. It lets the reader know what the central idea of your thesis is going to be, and it helps focus you as you write. Another example, art can spur political change. Let's make it a little bit more specific. I use art to explore how we can make people act collectively, specifically as a way to enact political change in my hometown. And a way to turn that into an even more specific research question could be, how can art that uses critical social documentaries and archives encourage people to act collectively to spur political change? You can see that the thesis statement version of that is I arrive at the conclusion that critical social documentaries and everyday archives can play a role in creating artworks that help spur people to act collectively on their own behalf, and that Peabody, the Syntropy Archive, which is the name of this person's work, makes use of both practices in hopes of achieving my goal of affecting political change in my hometown and beyond. Now, some tips are to create a mind map which again, if you scroll down on this page, you'll find another video about mind mapping. And another thing people do is to write out the separate sort of disparate ideas that they have about their artwork on index cards so that you can physically see and rearrange and come up with some sort of organizational structure for your thesis. And finally, as you're searching for information, just remember that you're a detective connecting the evidence. So don't try to find one article or book that says everything you're trying to say. If somebody already said it, then there would be no need for your thesis. Instead, identify the moving parts, those separate pieces, and use your own insight and artwork to connect the pieces. You're going to be researching each individual piece, not your entire thesis. So for example, you might research process-based artists. You might also research filler objects and reflective material. You might look for artists who combine sculpture and painting. And you might also find artists who explore nature and the body and architecture. But what you're not going to do is try to research all of those things all at once. Because again, if somebody had already connected those dots, then there would be no need for you to do it. So explore the rest of this page below to find tips and tools to help you accomplish these steps.